You create the world you live in. You cannot go back and change anything. Nothing can be done to return it to what it is. If this happens, allow yourself forgiveness and move on. So that's a quote from Maitreya, the founding bodhisattva of Yogacara, who is known as the Buddha of the future. Or as we tend to recognize him more commonly, Fat Laughing Buddha. I'm sure we've all seen his grin adorning the front doors of a succulent Chinese restaurant. And I find his quote so fitting to FF7 Remake. Not being able to change things, making the conscious decisions to change ourselves and going through destiny's crossroads to see how little our characters are actually able to bring about the change in their worlds that they want. And the aspect of creating the world we all live in is so fitting even to OG Cloud. Now, I am Cloud, master of my own illusory world, and like all of us, we are creating our own universes, and if our perceptions shape those universes in terrible and destructive ways, to allow forgiveness for ourselves, something that Aerith and Cloud have had such a relationship with.
True strength comes from our ability to forgive.
I think I want to be forgiven. More than anything.
By who?
What is good, my fellow peasants? We are continuing on with an even deeper dive today, centered on the 8 forms of consciousness in Buddhism and Yogacara. So the last video I made is a really important springboard into this. I'm not going to be doing much recap. I want to get lost in the source. So if you haven't seen it, it's really important to click the first link in the description, see that, and come back. Okay, assuming we are all caught up and on the same page, you bunch of beautiful Lord Junkie legends. That last video covered decoding the structure of 7 Rebirth. And one thing I only just noticed after making it, as I was covering string theory, Kabbalah, and now Yogacara, it was the configuration of 2, 5, and 8. In Yogacara, it's the 2 realms of existence, suffering and liberation, that contain the 5 realities of the aggregates that house the 8 stages of consciousness. And in 7 Remake, we have 2 worlds, Livestream and Chaos, no spiritually polarized aspects of the livestream, I guess, that house 5 stamped timelines, and the 8 stages of consciousness is represented by our core FF7 party members. Now I know what you're going to say, you smart little weasel. There's 9 characters, Pez. Well, this is where I'm shoehorning, and you got to go with me. It's going to make sense because obviously Square Enix haven't been using Yogacaric principles since the beginning of OG. They've definitely been using Buddhist ones, but the 8 still represent our characters in the context that these are the stages of senses that they're all going through. And the 8 of the 9 are not Cetra. They haven't achieved the full stage of enlightenment. And even within Buddhism, Nichiren Buddhism has the same concepts as Yogacara, but they do tack on a 9th. 9th is basically full enlightenment, the total attainment of nirvana, but Yogacara doesn't include that. They just roll the 9 into 8. I know it's quite a brain melt, but it is going to make sense how Najima is demonstrating Yogacara principles and the 8 of them through our 9 FF7 characters. Quick side note, I just realised the 2, 5, and 8, these are the beginnings of the Fibonacci sequence. Basically, the golden ratio that appears in every corner in religion and in science, even Sanskrit in Hinduism, which is also a very core tenet of Yogacara. In fact, it's massive. It's kind of basically the Hindu-Buddhist merge. They also talk about the Fibonacci sequence. That basically from the macrocosm to the microcosm, there is a immaculate symmetry in all things. Now, I know what you might be wondering, but what about the number 3, Pez? I know none of you are actually wondering that, but just pretend for now. This is all going to make sense shortly. Well, I got looking into that, and 3 in Yogacara is also pivotal to the structure of how it views the universe, because 3 is the number of natures in Yogacara called the Trisvabhavas. These natures are what basically encompass all phenomena in the universe. It's also the number of vehicles that exist in Buddhism to achieve the highest form of spirit. So basically 3 routes to enlightenment. Though there are 10 schools of Buddhism, of which Yogacara is one, they all kind of share this 3-fold path. And just like there's 3 paths to go up, there's also 3 paths to go down, and these are called the 3 poisons. Now, what's the parallel in Rebirth? I might be stretching, but I've got looking at the cover of the game, and did it not divide the image into 3 distinct colours and 3 distinct polarised characters? Cloud, Sephiroth and Zack, who could not be any more different in how they basically navigate and attain an ever higher transcendental levels of spirit. You know, the blue was the great blue sky, freedom, the Bushido code of Zack. Green, I think, was on Cloud's side, the life stream, the journey that he goes through reconciling memory and actually going in the live stream. And Sephiroth, was it red? Yeah, the meteor puncturing the planet and derping all of the souls to become a god. 3 distinct paths in Buddhism, and right there on the cover. Now, I know I'm wilding out already, and we're barely a few minutes in, but it's all food for thought. 2, 3, 5, and 8. Fibonacci, universal and spiritual codes for immaculate cosmic symmetry. Whether or not Square Enix, and I was going to say Nojima's doing this intentionally, I tend to think with Nojima, he does. Square Enix love this kind of stuff. They often hide meanings in numerology, and Yogacara, Nojima's told us, one of the vehicles that he's using to tell the remake story. So even if it's intentional or unintentional, this is what I think is showing up all in the trilogy. And I do think it's cool because, yeah, of the 10 schools that exist in Buddhism, Yogacara is very different. Many of the others focus on the inner world, on meditating and contemplating the unreality of the external world, even adopting monastic-like disciplines and codes of ethics and ethos to basically transcend the ego, and a lot of that can be detaching from the external, because the external tends to invite in a world of attachment as well as identification. Like I say, Yogacara is very different. Maitreya, Maitreya, the future Buddha, did a lot of work, less focusing on meditation and more about considering things like perception and cognition and what relation they share to the cosmos at large. It contemplates outwardly things like time, space, the future and the past, how our senses and actions create our little worlds of discrimination. Why do our ears like jazz but hate rock? Why do our eyes find some things beautiful and others ugly? Maitreya, the founder, as I explored his story, the Buddha of the future, he has such a super sci-fi seeming story that really stands out from a huge amount of the rest of Buddhism. The story is about him showing up in a later time in history. So he's incarnated 1,000 years ago, but he'll show up again to basically change the course of humanity's fate, to open a new divergence in the course of humanity when they reach a stage of putting the planet and themselves in a state of critical danger. Just like we're seeing in the trilogy. Of course, it was in critical danger in OG, but from what we're seeing on Zack's end and even the souls in Aerith's Dream Date, the world is coming to an end. And this is when Maitreya will come and save everything. Now, whether that saving is going to be how Sephiroth describes his actions, he thinks he's saving the world, or will it be more like Aerith's? Well, it's an interesting parallel to consider, but of course I tend to lean that because Maitreya is the body sattva most associated with embodying love. Everything he did was about cultivating and conditioning the qualities of love, compassion and empathy within himself. Very much like Aerith and the yellow flowers. Not so much like Sephiroth, who is sowing the purple flowers, the flowers of suffering. So, we've had the yellow and purple flowers throughout the game. Well, guys, get this. In the Korean shamanistic story of Maitreya, he can actually show up as either a creator god or even a goddess. And in the creation narrative, Maitreya goes up against a malevolent usurper who shows up, a deity by the name of Shakyamuni, who tries to claim dominion over Maitreya's world. And the two engage in a flower growing contest. A flower growing contest to decide who will rule the world. Maitreya grows abundantly, just fields and fields of them, very easy, just like our flower girl can, whereas Shakyamuni can't, or they're just false imitations. While the creator sleeps, he even tries to steal Maitreya's flowers creation. And in stealing them, Shakyamuni tries to manipulate and sneak its way to becoming the ruler of the world and brings about suffering and evil to it. So a flower growing contest. And what kind of flowers did Maitreya Buddha grow? Well, there were white ones and there were blue ones. We've seen those in Remake. But one of the prime colours, flowers with large golden petals. Yellow flowers basically made from the 7 treasures. Follow them. Follow the yellow flowers. And in following the yellow flowers, basically the world separate from the corrupted one Shakyamuni is trying to create, The world that Maitreya is trying to create will be a land of pure life, with no sycophancy or deceit, because he neither embraces nor clings to his fulfillment of Dana Paramita or Sila Paramita or Prana Paramita. I'm not going to cover those right now, but basically it will be sublime because of Maitreya's 10 wonderful vows, and sentient beings will be drawn to his loving kindness. He will invoke their gentle minds and they will see Maitreya. They will be reborn in his land, tame their senses and follow his teachings. Is that not what Aerith is doing? On the Aerith who is guiding souls, who's becoming, like I've said before, a social memory complex, an amalgamation of souls, ones that are calling her mother, who are being guided to the side of the yellow flowers. And in that process, not confirmed, I've just theorized this again and again, the Cetra, their reward for being caretakers of the planet was the promised land, and that's something that humans lost. And I've often spoke about this theory of what if Aerith shares the promised land with everyone? We've already seen her trying to teach kids at the flower gardens to be nurturers, Cloud to listen to the flowers, that there's clear evidence she's been trying to instill Cetra values back to the humans who have lost it. And whether or not that is the promised land, no Maitreya's pure land is the promised land, or even if it's just the world post FF7 trilogy that has found harmony with the planet, essentially Neo Midgar, one that's not polluting and destroying the world and the wildlife around it. And all of this coming into the future, changing the course of humanity and saving them when the world is close to destruction, in the Yogakaric verses, this is called Maitreya's promise. That's the prime descriptor, his promise. Even in the mantras that are sung to Maitreya are translated as promise. So in Sanskrit, Atmakam is consisting of and Samaya is promise. What was the last thing we saw in Rebirth at the end credits, at the back of Aerith? No promises await at Journey's end, even the last conversation she had with Cloud. I'll go deal with Sephiroth, you promise? Even the first trailer that announced this entire trilogy, what was the most iconic line? At last, the promise has been made. Woo! Oh my god. So at this point in my research, I was utterly convinced. Maitreya is a very strong parallel to Aerith, and I've always had this vibe that Aerith is obviously enlightened and trying to share that enlightenment with others, and her being a parallel to a Bodhisattva or Buddha. That's also how I've seen her and Cloud's relationship, a teacher-guru, student-pupil, Bodhisattva and acolyte relationship that also has some romance and intense affections and love. And I was hyped, man. I've always loved this aspect of Seven's story, because I've also seen Cloud as being a character who is fundamentally going on a journey of enlightenment, and it's super inspiring because he seems the least person fit to do so. Cloud starts the game as a Giga Chad douchebag, with Aerith being Maitreya. Yeah, I was convinced. And then I started reading all kinds of verses and stories, of which I can't do all of them, because I want to keep this video concise. That took me from being very convinced to just damn outright certain. I'll read one of them. So in the future, all of you will create merit, guard your discipline, and take birth in the presence of the Bodhisattva Maitreya. The Bodhisattva Maitreya will then bless all of you. Upon hearing Maitreya's name, they will no longer fall into the realms of darkness upon death, nor will they be reborn in any outlying regions, nor among people with wrong views, non-virtuous behaviours. Such people will be reborn in every lifetime where their view is proper, the retinue is abundant, and the 3 jewels are never disgraced. Yeah, those 3 jewels describe what I was saying earlier about the 3 paths. And if those noble sons or daughters who have broken their vows or committed unwholesome misdeeds hear the name of Bodhisattva of Great Compassion, call out his name, place their full body on the ground, confess with an undistracted mind, the entirety of their misdeeds will be swiftly purified. Thus spoke the Buddha. That verse really accurately describes the life stream. It's got the battle of purity and corruption. You've got the theme of rebirth, the condition of the souls of humanity, the karma that either binds someone to being a black or a white whisper. Maitreya is there to guide souls along one of the 3 paths that keeps a soul liberated, versus the 3 poisons which leads them into the lower realms of darkness. Now, I was wondering, am I really just so lost in the source and deep in the rabbit hole? I'm drawing all of these parallels. Well, I was questioning it until I came across that in Buddhism, these souls are described as Sotapannas. So in the Pali Canon, Sotapannas or Shrotpannas in Sanskrit. I'm definitely pronouncing those wrong. Maybe I'll try it in Chinese. The Zhu Tuao Huan. That's even worse. Basically, this is how they describe a soul. That they are interpreted variously as a stream enterer, stream winner, or stream entrant. Stream. A person who has seen their dharma and they've dropped the first 3 fetters. So the 3 poisons. These are things that bind a person to a possible rebirth in one of the 3 lower realms. One of those is an animal / monster. So like the Eligor in 7 Remake, or the Mechanoids, even Sephiroth, am I a monster? Basically the lowest form that you can incarnate into. The other one is a hungry ghost. The ghosts in the train graveyard. Or just a being suffering in a hellish state. The black whispers, the souls screaming on the wind, the anguish, and basically if you are able to turn away from that fate with virtuous deeds, following the teachings of Maitreya with his yellow flowers, that's how you become a Shrotpannar. So Shrotpannar kind of tends to be more what describes a white whisper, because it means you've basically crossed the threshold, the bar of virtue just enough that you've now put yourself on a better path of fate, if you will. A metaphor in the Eightfold Path that describes the stream being something that is like a drop of water. The soul is like a drop of water that leads to a vast ocean, the vast ocean being nirvana. The parallels that we have constantly, prolifically had throughout FF7 of water and the life stream. Even Aerith herself uses this metaphor in Livestream Chapter White and Maiden Who Travels the Planet, basically being a drop separate from the ocean but still part of the whole. And a Shrotpannar, like I said, is safe from falling into states of misery, basically being reborn as an animal, ghost or hell being, because their lust, hatred and delusion are no longer strong enough to cause rebirth in those lower realms. A Shrotpannar will have to be reborn at most 7 more times in the human or heavenly world before entering nirvana. In Sanskrit, Shrotpannar means one who has entered the flow. Whoa! I've just entered the flow. The tinfoil hyped flow. I hope you've just come along with me. So you heard me compare the 5 aggregates of Yogacara to 5 stamped timelines, the 8 forms of consciousness to our characters. Let's go into that. Let's dive into those 8 and let's blow your minds. So the 8th and the highest stage of these consciousness is known as Alaya Vijnana. This is basically causal consciousness, sometimes known as the storehouse of all consciousness. And listen to this. In the description titled Rebirth and Purification, the storehouse consciousness receives impressions from all functions of the other consciousness and retains them all as potential energy, bija or seeds, for their further manifestations and activities. Since it serves the container for all experiential impressions, it's also called seed consciousness or container consciousness. Remake has just blown the live stream up to also including memory and dreams. So the experiential impressions, the container being the live stream, retaining them all as potential energy, exactly what Shinra are slurp-a-derp-derping to power humanity's decadence, greed and corruption. Sephiroth is trying to absorb all that spiritual energy, and then you've got people like Aerith and Avalanche and the Advent Children trying to grow it. Continuing the verse, according to Yogakara's teachers, the seeds stored in the stored consciousness of sentient beings are not pure. The stored consciousness, while being originally immaculate in itself, contains a mysterious mixture of purity and defilement, good and evil. Because of this mixture, the transformation of consciousness from defilement to purity can take place and awakening is possible. Anyone who is a connoisseur of the FF7 story can tell how strikingly the description of the 8th stage of consciousness is, and this is where my main theory is that Aerith and Sephiroth are in a locked battle for control of the 8th consciousness. Now, breaking this down, because this could get quite complicated, but I believe that both Aerith and Sephiroth, within their own right, are both in 8th stage consciousness, because they are individually both storehouses of consciousness, containers of spiritual energy. Omni Aerith has assimilated with numerous souls, tens, thousands, maybe even millions, and has become what I've described as a social memory complex, an amalgamation of souls. Sephiroth too has become that. He's amalgamated in his own promised land, which we'll be covering on another video, with the failed clones we saw in the cutscene with Rufus. He's done it with Glenn Lodbrok. They are both containers of consciousness, but they are fundamentally split, and so the container is no longer whole. The totality of it has been broken into two halves. World of Livestream, World of Chaos. And what lies at the centre of that is our boy Cloud. And I've always theorised that Cloud, this was kind of my God mode theory, they would either become a god, gain temporary powers of God, or he would just have like a human instrumentality level of decision. Gain or outright make a decision on the live stream's fate, basically. But now I have so much more of a direct definition. Cloud will determine what happens to the 8th storehouse, and at the end of my last video I covered how I believe we've already seen Cloud get roughly yeeted into stage 7. So that was the mental defilement stage, the defiled consciousness that splits a person's reality into two opposite worlds, wanted and unwanted, and that's the juxtaposition of Cloud being split between two realities of saving and not saving Aerith, and that fundamentally the unwanted and wanted is all an illusion. That's how Buddhism describes it. It's an illusion, it's Maya. But shifting away from Cloud for a sec, let's look at the other characters in relation to the 8 consciousnesses. So 5 of them are sense-based. It's the basic smell, sight, hearing, taste, touch, and yeah, basically every human has these, right? We also have stages of 6, 7, and 8. We all have conscious minds, we also have unconscious minds, and we have, well, according to Buddhists, the soul, the transcendental self. But how much do we hone and master these gifts? How much do we master these senses? And picture that mastery in a far more high fantasy way, because we've got Nanaki's nose, right? That nose that can detect things even within failed clones that others can't. Remember that scene where Cloud even asked Red what he could smell about him? And I think Red just said, well, you smell like Cloud. His sense of smell, transcendental. Oh, and I'm going to add this in post-editing, because if indeed Red does have the higher Yogacara sense of smell, like a more transcendental, spirit level sensitivity, well, just after that scene, Yuffie asked Red, what do I smell like? To which Red did not reply, ... And she said, what, do I smell like rotten eggs or something? What if the reason Red went silent is because in Dirge of Cerberus, I've had this theory a long time, Yuffie fell into Nero's oblivion, his darkness, his void, and Nero said that Oblivion has the ability to absorb and extract, and that it would basically remain with Yuffie, like on a blighted soul level. And I didn't see it as any coincidence that Nero portaled straight to Yuffie in episode intermission. What if that is what Red was detecting when Yuffie asked him, what do I smell like? Back to the video, let's go. Then you've got Barrett. Have we not heard multiple times him saying, can't you hear the planet? Yo, are you telling me you don't hear her rallying cry? Now, of course, we all thought this was just a metaphor, right? Barrett doesn't actually hear the planet, unlike Aerith. She's a Cetra. She can actually hear the voice of the planet. For him, it's just metaphorical. Well, is it? Because then I got remembering the scene where only Barrett could hear Wedge. This is crazy. So it was the scene after we saw Wedge eat shite on the concrete. And he hears him. I think Wedge says, like, everything's going to be good, bro. And Barrett hears it. Now you might say, oh, it's because we're near the BattleBots live stream machine. Well, if that's the case, why didn't Tifa hear it? Red even expressly says to Barrett, it's not possible that you heard him. Souls move on after they died, and tells him he must be mistaken, and he is confusing it with the wind. But Barrett and us know he wasn't. This character who's spoken about his hearing. So I think that's an example of Barrett progressing, at least in one of the dimensions of the 8 stages of consciousness. We had Aerith putting her hand in the live stream and sensing Zack. Bodily sensation is one of the 8. Zack was also detecting and having bodily sensation of Aerith. We had Tifa falling in the live stream, actually seeing with her own eyes. The black, the white whispers, the weapon, Sephiroth coming in stabbing it, trying to kill her. And experience that we've all seen definitely upgraded her, and I don't see it as any coincidence that now she's getting mental flashes after that, but I'll cover that later. We had Bugenhagen in no uncertain terms, literally listing off the senses, saying you have to have the eyes to see, the ears to hear. The senses, the central premise of Yogacara, it's all weaved in. And this was here even back in Remake, when Aerith said to Cloud, you've got to listen to the flowers. The Edge of the Highway scene where Seth said that those who look with clouded eyes see only shadow. That's hearing, that's seeing, and those showed up again in Rebirth. Sephiroth said to Cloud, come see the true nature of reality. And with the hearing, this scene here was huge. Let me just play it.
Listen to the planet, Cloud. To her ecstatic cries, her rapture.
Screaming! It's screaming!
Oh, Cloud. I thought you might finally understand.
He thought Cloud was finally beginning to understand. Sephiroth is clearly expressing disappointment here, because what I'm theorizing was he was immediately gauging where Cloud was in his journey through the 8 stages of consciousness. Yeah, like I teased in the last vid, Alaya is stage 7, defiled consciousness, and this is a stage where self-awareness and emptiness meets. Sephiroth wants Cloud to be an empty vessel, a puppet. The theme song Hollow tells us that Cloud is experiencing a void within. He's experiencing that emptiness. What has he said? I don't know where I start and others begin. That he's losing himself. And when Cloud heard only screaming and not the rapture, Sephiroth instantly got a gauge of Cloud's spiritual status. And I believe was disappointed because he wants Cloud to go the full length of the journey. Again, for this theme of emptiness. Because I want to be clear about this. So in Buddhism, emptiness doesn't have an inherently bad connotation. So while Cloud is a lost, broken, hollow person, he's actually also the closest to attaining enlightenment. Because emptiness, when it's like vacuity or just catatonic blankness, is actually what can come right before what the Buddhists describe as sunyata. So sunyata means emptiness, voidness, openness, or spaciousness. It describes how they see that all phenomena lack inherent essence or existence. It also relates to the meditative state or experience that leads up to enlightenment. And the etymology, sunyata is usually translated as devoidness, emptiness, hollow, or hollowness. Come on guys, even here sunya in the context of Buddha Dharma primarily means empty or void and derives from the root svi, meaning hollow. One example of this usage in the word that I'm not even going to try to pronounce states that on close inspection each of the 5 aggregates are seen as being void, Ritika, hollow, Tuchaka, and Corlus, Asaraka. And here we have Cloudy Boy creating a power ballad called Hollow. Good googly moogly. This verse in the Prana Paramita also describes sunyata using various metaphors to explain the nature of things as emptiness, stating that things are like illusions. So Maya, what did we see in the final cutscene after he tells the crew not to look up? He sees the rift in the sky, he says, it's just an illusion. But they're also described as being like Svapna, dreams. Sephiroth hovering over Cloud, dream the sweetest dream. Aerith meeting Cloud in a new stamp timeline. Oh, we could just call it a dream. Even in the final fight with Aerith and Cloud against Sephiroth, what did he say? Is this all reality or is this all just a fever dream? Cloud is being ripped from illusion to illusion because he, I theorize, is at the 7th stage, and both Sephiroth and Aerith are essentially grooming Cloud. Obviously Aerith in the nice kind of way that doesn't violate his free will, are having to prepare him for what's going to be coming in part 3, I believe, Arbiter, or the actual embodiment of the totality of the 8th stage of consciousness. And to do that, to go from this defiled, hollow, sunyata stage in relation to seeing the different stamped timelines. Well, in Buddhism, if he knows the 5 aggregates as like an illusion, but makes not illusion one thing and the aggregates another. If freed from the notion of multiple things, multiple timeline, multiverse bullshit, then he courses in peace. Then that is the practice of his wisdom, the highest perfection. Cloud has to sift through the illusion, reflect on the reality and the unreality of things, and only then, mastering that realness of the 5 aggregates, will he get to the 8th stage. And the 8th stage, which will be perceiving dharmas and beings like an illusion, is termed the great armour of the Bodhisattva, who is also termed the illusory man. Wow, that's so cool. That was what really gave me the strongest sense that Cloud is destined to become essentially a Bodhisattva, because even Nirvana itself, where Bodhisattva goes, is said to be empty, like a dream or magical illusion. So there it all is, guys. A crazily large number of striking parallels that I think not only describes our flower girl, Aerith, as Maitreya, and I just realised I've been saying it wrong this entire video. I think the more correct pronunciation is Maitreya. I think that's how you say it. Herped up. And that Cloud is also going to be destined to become a Bodhisattva. And if actually not even just Cloud, I could see the rest of our characters. And there's so much more I want to break down with all of them. Still so many pieces of juicy information and lore that I haven't been able to include in this video because I want to keep them concise and avoid that 40-minute mark. But I hope you guys have enjoyed it. Comment, like and subscribe down below. Did this titillate your brain holios? And before I sign out, I'm going to try to give you guys like a picture. Like, this has been a crazy amount of information and lore dump, and I bet you're questioning, well, what does this all mean for part 3? What's the best prediction theory like picture I can paint for you as to what all of these Yogacara principles and premises could do for the story of part 3? I think would be really cool is that even if it's for a moment, a blip, that everything that our characters who have lived entire lives before this trilogy, everything that happened in Advent Children and beyond still exists within their psyche, their consciousness, their souls. What I would like to see is an event that shoves all of our characters through the heightened stages of Yogacara consciousness. Essentially, not just Cloud goes on the enlightenment journey. What if they do all remember their Advent Children selves? What if Aerith does fulfill the promise of the future Buddha and blesses these characters with the potential to save the spirit of the world? I think what I want to share is what Maitreya's promise looks like, because it is super sci-fi and super spiritual in a way that I think fits the tone of FF7. So Maitreya's promise will be a spiritual revolution on a galactic scale where reality itself will be overhauled. The scales of karma will not just be rebalanced but shattered entirely, and the cycles of rebirth will be transcended. The scope of this thing can't be understated. Billions of souls will be dunked the mother of TED Talks. One video I watched described that it would be like 1 million Woodstocks and UN summits combined. Maitreya will show up when humanity is in the darkest of dark ages. The world and the ecosystem are on the brink of collapse. Spiritual wisdom and traits like love and compassion have almost all but diminished from the world, and in he will come from left field. But not just as a lone wolf. Aerith is not a lone wolf in this. Maitreya has been preparing allies, advanced souls, an entire squad of them who will show up to be a part of this revolution. They will be the Avengers of Enlightenment, assembling, that will kick off the Golden Age in an insane display. Some vids describe that these will be beings larger than skyscrapers, performing miraculous events, universe-shattering physics that will make Albert Einstein claw his way up from the grave just to investigate, and that truth bombs will be dunked one after the other that will reverberate through not just the space-time continuum but numerous planes of spiritual existence, and that through these events countless souls will be inspired by what they witness. Their minds will be invoked, their hearts will be spoken to. They will gain a vastness of inspiration, spiritual insight, motivation and optimism for life that will be deeper than the ocean. If that is what part 3 and the end of a nearly 3 decade-long compilation. A story that has stretched, for most of us, from our very earliest childhoods. To many of us, Final Fantasy VII was one of the first video games we ever truly fell head over heels for, that stuck with us, that permeated and resonated for the majority of our adult lives. I do not know if Square Enix will pull this off, if they and this trilogy can deliver something that powerful. But quite frankly, my dudes, even if it came a fraction as close to what Maitreya's promise brings to humanity, then this could be huge. I'm hoping that the weave of Yogacara, the inclusion of these tales, I hope they're using it as a vehicle in which to tell the remake story to deliver this type of powerful outcome and finale to the world and the universe of Final Fantasy VII and our characters, because at last the promise has been made. Peace out guys, be well, and I'll see you on the next video.